So today I'm going to share a fact about myself that some people might know or may have guessed, but not one I necessarily share that publicly. And it's the following. I believe in Bigfoot. In fact, I believe in all of God's cryptozoological creatures. You might be asking yourself, why? Where's the proof? And I'll tell you, I don't need proof to believe. There's a joy and wonder that comes with believing in something like Bigfoot. There's fun stories that can be had in believing in Bigfoot. And sometimes scary stories, which are maybe not my favorite, but I also think that the presence of the Bigfoot lends just a little bit more of an air of mysticism than we already have here in the Pacific Northwest. It expands upon the already established expectations that this place is closely combined with the beautiful creation around us. And in that creation around us, we are closely connected to God. Now, I don't watch Bigfoot hunting TV. And I've not attended our local festival, Squatch Fest, that draws both national and international visitors to our community. Now, I don't participate in those things because I'm not in pursuit of the Bigfoot. I'm not in pursuit of the Bigfoot because I don't need to prove his existence. It's simply enough for me to believe and to find joy in that belief. And maybe to have a couple of Bigfoot-themed items for fun. And I will say, I think part of my belief in Bigfoot, my desire, my faith that Bigfoot exists, is encouraged through my own practice of faith. You see, we practice a deeply spiritual, mystical faith here in the Episcopal Church. The practice of the Eucharist that we celebrate every single Sunday is a tangible expression of a deeply mystical faith and act. What happens at that table, what we believe happens at that table, is a mystical transformation of ordinary common objects into something extraordinary. We can still see the blood and the body as the bread and the wine, but we believe it has become something different. We hear from Hebrews today, now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the connection of things not seen. When I read this today, I was reminded of a teaching that we have in the College for Congregational Development. Part of the Year B curriculum, which we just had this summer that I was part of training, is teaching about cultural competency and our specific power and privileges that we possess in the United States of America. Researchers and authors Nieto and Boyer write particularly on religion that those who are Christian are privileged in the United States, and also those who are atheist or agnostic are also privileged in the United States because the God that they don't believe in is the Christian God. Atheism and agnosticism are byproducts of our culture. It's a culture that pushes us to disassociate from one another, that pushes us to find truth on our own. But the pursuit of truth, as it's defined by our culture, is kind of a fool's errand when it comes to faith. There certainly is truth in faith, but it's different than what our culture expects truth to be. A lot of times you might hear people who claim to be atheist claim that because they believe in science. But science is not antagonistic of faith. And faith is not antagonistic of science, at least it shouldn't be. Science lets us see the things that need to be seen. Things that are microscopic can be seen. things like viruses and the way to defeat them through vaccines. One way that we can see the truth of the world at work, that truth that we do know. But our faith allows us to know that that is real, that science can exist, and we can still believe in something beyond that, something that goes past what we can see. Now, it might not surprise you, considering my just confessed a belief in the Bigfoot, but I love to read and consume stories of science fiction. Whether books or TV, science fiction is probably my number one genre. And often, I like science fiction because the understandings of religion and faith tends to be a lot more nuanced in these stories than what we are culturally allowed in our public discourse with one another. I mean, what's the old saying? You never discuss politics and religion with someone you don't know, right? Well, science fiction allows faith conversations to be had. And mystical elements are not only allowed in these stories, but often they're expected. Whether it's ancient beings, creators, gods of time and space, especially when we're talking about space operas, way out in the interstellar expanses. Heck, even Star Wars, the Jedi, considered a faith practice. One thing I've learned through all of these stories is that the characters that push back the hardest on the mystical elements present in these stories often then experience that mystical element in profound and narratively important ways. And I think the truth of that storytelling, the truth of the authors, the truth of the characters present in those stories, is that they're seeking a connection to something bigger than. This is something we all have within us, a desire to have a connection to something bigger than. The connection to something bigger than is the key element of Hebrews 11 and today's gospel. As we read in Hebrews 11, talking about all of those who had come before, the very beginnings of the faith. All of these died in faith without having received the promises, but from a distance they saw and greeted them. They confessed that they were strangers and foreigners on the earth. For people who speak in this way make it clear that they are seeking a homeland. If they had been thinking of the land that they had left behind, they would have had opportunity to return. But as it is, they desire a better country, that is, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God. Indeed, he has prepared a city for them. And then we hear Christ in the gospel, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Why would we then focus on storing up treasures here on earth and forsake those treasures that we could store up with God? It's clear. The treasures here on earth are tangible. They're things that we can see, the things that we can touch and reach and grab. And we're also told by our society that we must have these things in order to assign a value to our own worth in this society. But obviously these things are not our worth. And when we accept that reality, we can then lean into our faith. We can lean into the mystical elements of our faith that allow us to believe without seeing, that allow us to know truth without having to see it in the way society wants us to see it. We trust that our treasures are stored with God. We place our faith in God, in the unseeable, from which God's promises are made visible to us. This is the challenge and call of our faith, and also why so many struggle with accepting faith in their own lives. Because it does run counter to what we are told we must know and believe. So as Christians, we must know and live this truth in our faith. We must know and live this truth in our faith as an example to lead others who are here with us, to help them in their journeys as they become more engaged, wanting to learn more, to know more, to accept more in our faith, to connect to that mystical reality of God that is present with us every single Sunday. We must know and live this truth in our faith through our presence with others throughout our lives in this community, our families and friends and neighbors, to show others what it means to believe in God, what it means to store up our treasures with God and not here on earth. We must know and live this truth in our faith because our faith helps others believe. Our expression of faith helps others believe in the mystical reality of God. Our expression of faith helps others believe in the treasures that are stored up with God. And our expression of faith might help others also believe in Bigfoot. Who knows? This is our call today. As Christians, as the people of St. Stephen's, to live our faith, to store up our treasures with God, to make that reality, that truth, known to all. Amen.